All right, if everyone wants to take their seats, we'll get started on the presentation here in about 2 minutes. All right, we'll go ahead and get started here. Thanks everyone for attending tonight's public meeting, the US14 Bypass Corridor Study. My name is John Wiggin. I'm the Consultant Project Manager with HDR, and I have about a 45 minute or so presentation here to introduce concepts that have come out of essentially that brainstorming phase where we look to address the issues and needs that we heard from you all at the last public meeting and stakeholder meetings that we held here tonight. So with that, a few housekeeping items. First thing, if you did not sign in, please sign in the back. If you leave your contact information, we'll make sure to add you to the mailing and email list for future notifications and study updates. Also back there, we have a comment card and informational handout that has information on the overall corridor study, as well as the purpose of tonight's meeting. The study website is listed there. It's also on your informational handout and comment card. All the information you see here at tonight's public meeting with all the display boards of the different layouts, as well as the informational handout, comment card, a copy of tonight's presentation, as well as a recording of tonight's presentation will all be posted to the website by the end of the day on Wednesday before the long Thanksgiving break. So tonight's meeting format, we'll start with an introductory presentation, like I said, about 45 minutes or so. And at that point, we'll break back into the open house portion of the meeting. So if you have questions and comments, please save those until the open house portion. There's a number of folks from the study advisory team here to answer your questions and discuss what you see here tonight. And then finally, there's several ways to provide feedback, and it includes comment cards, study website. We do have a place you can go on the website and submit comments directly to me. You can also reach out to the study contacts through email, phone, or mail. Really, whatever is most convenient for you. The one thing we do ask is that you provide comments by December 10th. That allows us to quickly move into the next phase of the study. So first off, the purpose of today's meeting is really twofold. I have a few slides here to provide an overview of the study and a status update where we're at. And then the bulk of the presentation will be related to presenting preliminary concepts for your feedback. I do want to stress that no recommendations have been made at this point in the study. Essentially, we're coming out of the brainstorming phase of the study. We have a vast array of different concepts, many of them looking at both ends of the spectrum of what we're looking to accomplish in these areas. So just something to keep in mind. We're still no recommendations made at this point. So example feedback, what we're looking from you all tonight, a couple questions that you could be asking yourself as you go through the concepts. The first one is there something that we didn't address? Is there something maybe that we missed at specific locations? What do you like or not like with specific concepts? We'd be very curious to hear, your thoughts on what you see on the concepts, both pros and cons. And then, what would you add or remove from a concept to make it better? Maybe there's a concept that, almost is quite there, and maybe you add this small piece and it's something maybe we overlooked or just incorporate. Make a comment of that, kind of what would make it a slam dunk in your opinion. So the study team, study contacts, myself, John Wigan with HDR, I'm the consultant project manager, and Steve Graham, who's in the back. He is the South Dakota Department of Transportation project manager. At the onset of the study, the DOT organized a study advisory team to help guide the study through completion, and that's made up of members from the DOT, Federal Highway Administration, City of Brookings, City of Volga. Also at the onset of the study, the DOT retained the services of the consulting firm HDR to help them deliver the study here through completion. So the study area that we're looking at, it's US14 bypass corridor extending from the west end at the US14 US 81 intersection, heading east through Volga along the US 14 bypass, and then the east end is US 14B east intersection on the east side of Brookings. One thing I do want to stress is that we are not looking at US 14 or 6th Street through Brookings. That here in the Brookings area, we are focusing on the US 14 bypass. So the overarching study goal that we're looking to accomplish here is to develop a long-range plan for the US 14 bypass corridor. And really that's looking to answer two primary questions. And one of those is what improvements are needed over the next 20 to 30 years, from an operations, a safety, and addressing various other needs, what is needed here in the next 20, 30 years. And what is the timeline for those improvements? And some of the concepts are geared more towards improvements here in the next 5 to 10 years, while some of them are way long term, kind of more out to that 30-year horizon, looking at 2050 needs. And all that funnels into developing a plan for implementation for the DOT. It allows them to start scheduling future projects and prioritizing those and establishing timeline of improving the corridor. A couple key components of the plan. First and foremost, and the primary driver of this study is US 14 bypass and 22nd Avenue intersection. I'm sure a lot of you are aware that there's some operational and safety challenges at that intersection, and that was really kind of the impetus for this study. And with that, the first major project plan coming out of this study is at that location that the DOT has a build out, essentially addressing those long-term needs at that intersection planned for around fiscal year 2024. And then from there, there's a number of other components of the plan, considering looking at I-29 US 14 bypass interchange, looking at the corridor number of lanes, not on US 14 bypass, also looking at number of lanes west of Volga, looking at intersection turn lane needs as well. And then all that considered, we're also doing an environmental overview of all the concepts that have been developed, and that essentially helps us better understand the potential environmental impacts that those concepts may have moving forward. So study process and schedule, from a timeline perspective, we're right at the halfway point. We've completed, just completing the first two tasks of the study. That first one was where we gather information, do the data collection, conduct the preliminary analysis, all with the goal of establishing the issues and needs that we are looking to address on this corridor. And that the culmination of that first phase was the last public meeting asking for your input on those needs. That allowed us to move in here to the second phase that we're just wrapping up as part of this public meeting, and that was developing and beginning to evaluate concepts from a brainstorming level. And again, this is kind of that big picture, looking at a vast array of concepts. Following tonight's public meeting, tomorrow night's public meeting in Volga, we'll move into the third phase, and that allows us to go into further refinement of these concepts. We can go into more detailed analysis, and we start to group things together, kind of putting all the pieces together with intersections and corridor segments into what we call feasible scenarios for that further analysis. Then we get into the fourth phase, where we get into a little bit more of the screening of those scenarios. We can start developing some preliminary recommendations, starting to draft the report, and that's when we'll come back for our third and final public meeting, kind of in that spring 2020 timeframe, where we'll be able to present that information to you for your feedback before wrapping up the corridor study. Last two phases are related to the report, finalizing recommendations based on feedback from you all, the third public meeting, and we hope to wrap up the study around the end of June 2020. So with that, I'd like to transition into discussing many of the concepts that we've developed to date. And I'm going to be following this order, working through the corridor that will start with US14 bypass. We have some concepts looking at the corridor typical sections, or essentially the number of through lanes through the bypass. We have some concepts related to intersections as well as the interchange I-29. From there, we'll move to the US14 bypass west and east intersection areas. And then we'll jump west to US14 Volga, a little bit of discussion on US14 west of Volga, and then a final slide with a few other areas and some additional concepts. So the one thing I do want to stress here is that this presentation does not include all concepts developed for the study. That if you have additional questions, you'll probably see that there's some gaps. But basically, if we're going to walk through all of them, we'd probably be here for an hour and a half. So try and keep it relatively condensed. And that's what the open house portion is following this presentation. So first off, I want to start with the US14 bypass and typical section and the number of lanes through the corridor. And at the first public meeting, we heard just a number of different needs and benefits of multiple lanes through the corridor. And I'm not going to go through all these, but really, kind of taking this entire list and moving that forward, that helped us to develop 3 different concepts that we're looking for, essentially to lay the foundation of what we're looking at here through the US14 bypass. And the first one is that it's a 3-lane with continuous center left turn lane configuration, essentially what's out there right now. And that would entail, the lanes that are out there and then various turn lane and other intersection improvements to meet operational and safety goals of the study. The other 2 concepts look at adding additional lanes here along the bypass. And the first one is what we call a 4-lane divided with a raised median type concept. An example of that is in the picture in the top right. And you can see the multiple lanes in each direction. You have the raised median down the middle. That's a picture of South Dakota 38/60th Street in Northwest Sioux Falls. And that would be very close to what this type of a section would look like. The other typical section that we're moving forward with is a 5-lane with continuous center left turn lane. And that would be very similar to how Madera Avenue was, or the US14 bypass through the Madera Avenue intersection was a few years ago before it was striped and narrowed to a single lane in each direction. But essentially that carries 2 lanes along the bypass in each direction, but instead of that raised median between the major intersections, it would be a continuous left turn lane, very similar to what's out there right now. All 3 of these concepts moving forward that we do include a potential shared use path on the south side of the corridor, and you'll see that in a dashed blue line in many of the concepts. Applicable speeds, that was a concern by many in the first public meeting. At this point, we're moving forward, and all 3 of these corridors would be applicable kind of in that 45 to 55 mile an hour range. And then one thing to note that with these typical sections, that they can be applied singularly, and maybe it's like it is right now with kind of the 3-lane section through the entire bypass, or where we start to see more of the higher traffic volumes west of the bypass, and maybe a 4-lane divided or 5-lane is applicable west of I-29 and east of I-29 where the volumes drop off significantly and it's a different type of traffic. Maybe a 3-lane is much more pertinent in that location. So just kind of keeping all that in mind, really from a typical section standpoint, everything is on the table moving forward. So with that, I'm going to move along the bypass kind of intersection by intersection and touch a few of the high points on needs we're looking to address, as well as a summary of the concepts that have been developed. And the first one here is at Western Avenue. And looking long-term, looking to address traffic operations and safety needs, but also kind of setting it up for future development north of Brookings. That as Brookings begins to maximize the available developable area here in the immediate vicinity, their next growth area is to the north of the bypass outside of the floodplain. So Western Avenue is likely going to be a key north-south corridor in this area, and one of the things that we'd like to do is plan for future build-out to address those needs when that occurs. So you can see an example here. This is what a 5-lane section would look like extending through the corridor. And then you see to the north and the south the reconstructed legs of Western Avenue to add in turn lanes. Moving east to Madera Avenue, the needs looking to address here related to traffic operations and safety. And this is kind of one of those first intersections, so not only from a daily traffic standpoint, we really start to get into that event traffic management standpoint as well. So in terms of, what the concepts, for the most part, this intersection is pretty well built out. That, at one point it was striped, multiple lanes in each direction. It's currently striped multiple lanes in the north-south direction along Madera Avenue. And the concept we have for this intersection is essentially maintaining the current infrastructure that's out there right now, and then adding turn lanes as needed to fit, what's a 3-lane or 4-lane or 5-lane typical section in the future. Then moving east to the Stadium Road and Jackrabbit Avenue intersections immediately north of the stadium. And here, from a needs to address standpoint, really start getting into that, event traffic management in this case, really much more so than the daily traffic management from an operations standpoint. And the concepts we developed, are build out of intersections with a mix of intersection access treatments. And the figure that's shown here is maintaining that 3-lane section similar to what's out there right now along the bypass, but it's widening out Stadium Road and Jackrabbit Avenue to increase the functionality during event traffic. That one of the things that we noted and discussed with SDSU this afternoon is just increasing that functionality where instead of just a single lane coming in on Stadium Road and Jackrabbit Avenue, on the arrival time they could have multiple lanes coming in with the goal of removing the queuing traffic off the US14 bypass, which creates safety issues, and getting that queued traffic off the bypass and onto Stadium Road and Jackrabbit Avenue. So looking at a concept with the 4-lane divided with the raised median, in this location we show Jackrabbit Avenue there on the right as a full access intersection, and then Stadium Road on the left is a 3/4 access intersection. And essentially what that does is at Stadium Road, it allows all movements in to Stadium Road, but it would not allow a left turn to head westbound immediately out of Stadium Road. And anyone wishing to turn west would either go over to Jackrabbit Avenue where you'd have the full access, or they turn right and then make a U-turn at Jackrabbit Avenue and head back to the west. And the purpose for that intersection is, not only to help event traffic management standpoint, but from a safety perspective, that there are significant safety benefits by prohibiting a left turn movement out of the side street. A lot of times that's where the high severity crashes occur, someone wishing to turn left out of the side street, and you get those angle crashes either with eastbound or westbound, high speed, high volume movements. So taking that one step further, instead of full access at Jackrabbit Avenue, this concept incorporates the 3/4 access at both Stadium Road and Jackrabbit Avenue. And again, that's kind of looking at both, helping from an event traffic management standpoint, but also from a daily operation standpoint in those benefits you see from the safety impacts or safety effects of the 3/4 access. All downstream intersections would accommodate U-turns. For example, Stadium Road would still be able to make a U-turn at Jackrabbit Avenue. Jackrabbit Avenue traffic would be able to make a U-turn at some sort of median access break east of there or at 22nd Avenue intersection. So moving to 22nd Avenue, one thing you want to note that if you're here at the last public meeting, had mentioned that there is an upcoming DOT project to signalize the intersection in the short term. Unfortunately, that wasn't able to go here this fall. It is now planned for signal construction at this intersection here this summer 2020. Also with that project, there will be a northbound right turn lane added there as well. And the plan is that that signal would stay in place and operational until the 2024 DOT project that is kind of that full build of the intersection. So just keep that in mind. A signal is coming, and we're likely looking at 2020 construction for that traffic signal. So looking at some of the long-term needs and build-out potential here at this intersection, the needs to address, traffic operations and safety, both from a daily traffic and event traffic management aspects, as well as looking at some of the access within the functional area of the intersection. Essentially, that is some of the driveways here within the larger footprint of the intersection that create some safety conflicts depending on the turns that would occur at those locations. So the concepts we developed, they entail build out of the intersection to meet operational and safety goals. And then they also provide varying degrees of access management in the area as well. So the first concept that you see up here on the screen is with that 3-lane section, similar to what's out there right now. Builds out the north and south legs of 22nd Avenue, as well as westbound right turn lane to meet those long-term operational goals in terms of daily traffic. So with that one, pretty simplistic, strictly looking at the operations and safety with that build out. And then we start incorporating some access management into the concepts, and this one is with the 4-lane divided with the raised median, and that's what the dark blue represents. You can see the raised median extended all the way up to the 22nd Avenue intersection. And then you can see what the build out would look like of that intersection with the turn lanes on all 4 legs of the intersection. Similar to the 3/4 access type movements, that all driveways that you see there to the north would be right in, right out, with the U-turn accommodated at the downstream location, intersection. And then taking access management one step further and essentially eliminating those access points within the intersection area, this concept shifts the US14 bypass corridor to the south and installs a frontage road both on the west and east sides of 22nd Avenue along the north side. And with that, there'd be various tie-in points with the main goal of where those access locations are well outside of the functional area of the 22nd Avenue intersection. With this one, you can see this would be with the 5-lane section that would have the continuous left turn lane, away from outside of the 22nd Avenue intersection area. So with that, we'll move to the I-29 interchange. And, the needs that we're looking to address here are, related to traffic operations and safety. Quite a few different safety concerns identified here and there throughout the interchange. Structure width was certainly one of them. The width of the structure right now certainly limits the functionality of the interchange. Also some safety concerns with that width as well. And then one other thing looking to address is the distance between what we call the east ramp terminal intersection, which is essentially that intersection of the interchange on the east side of I-29, and that distance between that intersection and 32nd Avenue. Currently, it's about 460 feet from stopping point to stopping point between those two intersections. And generally, we like to look at 660 feet as that desired minimum distance between those types of intersections. So with that, we looked at various interchange configurations I'll quickly walk through here. Here's 3 examples. The first one is with the standard diamond, and essentially that reconstructs the configuration that's out there right now. And really the main benefit here is that it widens the structure through the interchange and allows for turn lanes to be implemented between the 2 ramp terminal intersections. One thing it does not address is the spacing between the interchange and 32nd Avenue. Is maintained around that 460 feet. The middle picture is of a diverging diamond, which from an operations and safety standpoint, it works really well. However, from a spacing aspect, it's still kind of in that same general ballpark. In this instance, about 370 feet for one of the westbound diverge points for westbound movements. So kind of doesn't really improve much on the safety side of things. And then the right figure is of a single point interchange, which is very common, throughout the Sioux Falls area along I-29, I-229. And one of the main benefits here is that it brings everyone into a signalized main intersection over I-29 main line. And the separation between that intersection and 32nd Avenue is upwards of almost 900 feet, so nearly double what you get out there right now. A couple of concerns though with the single point is that still with some of the right turn movements, you're still fairly close to the interchange. You certainly improve the spacing, but not significantly. And then one of the primary drawbacks is the cost. And you can see the footprint of the bridge here really drives up the cost. And for some of these diamond type interchanges, It's nearly double the cost of more of a standard diamond type interchange. So, understanding that those first concepts address operations safety needs. From a traffic operations standpoint, all of them operate really or function really well. So looking at focusing on increasing that spacing between the interchange and 32nd Avenue, the first one there you see on the left is a compressed diamond. And basically what that does, it starts to bring in the ramp terminal intersections a little bit closer to the I-29 main line. In this instance, that we're achieving about 600 feet of separation. So we're getting better, getting closer to that 660 feet. The middle one is what we call a tight diamond, which brings the ramp terminal intersections into a distance, they're about 200 to 400 feet apart. And that can achieve spacing of, looks like 760 feet, pretty close to 800 feet, which is considerably better. That being said, there has been some concerns with the tight diamond, both from a cost standpoint, the need for retaining walls, as well as potential maintenance issues. As you know, that through Brookings, a lot of blowing snow coming from the northwest. There's some concern that if you create this valley here within this interchange, that's going to be a maintenance headache moving into the future, just while all the snow dropping out of the wind within the interchange. So with that, we created what we called a modified tight diamond, where on the east side, we're still bringing the ramp terminal intersection in tight with I-29 to achieve that benefit with the separation of 32nd Avenue. And on the west side, it's more reflective of a compressed diamond or standard diamond spacing. And that really allows for more of the snow to drop out of the wind before it gets to I-29 main line and kind of assist with some of those maintenance concerns. So moving east of the interchange, I have a few concepts related to 32nd Avenue and 34th Avenue intersections. And the needs to address here are quite different than what we saw west of the bypass, that the volumes drop significantly as you go from 22nd Avenue, then you get to the interchange, to 32nd Avenue to 34th Avenue, to the fact that around 34th Avenue, through volumes are nearly a third of what you see between Madera and 22nd Avenue. Now that being said, we see a significant number of turning trucks in this area through the industrial area. So that's one of the things we're looking at to address through some of these concepts. Also, if the interchange configuration doesn't stay, what can we do with 32nd Avenue from a corridor perspective to increase that spacing to try and exceed 660 feet east of the interchange? And then also looking at various access management treatments. So the concepts looked at various intersection and local access configurations. The first one you see up here on the screen maintains 32nd Avenue as a full access. This would likely be more applicable to like a tight diamond, a compressed diamond, or single point where we can achieve some of that greater spacing. Then you have the median running between 32nd and 34th to prohibit some of the left turning traffic and those safety conflicts at those driveways. And then 34th Avenue would be full access as well. And then taking it to the other end of the spectrum, and this one essentially closes all access all the way over to 34th Avenue. And this like I said, it's the other end of the spectrum, but from a traffic and operations standpoint, through the corridor and maintaining those interchange operations, very effective moving forward. One of the things we do recognize, and we have several boards that look at different iterations of this too. We also note that there's going to be a number of local network improvements, whether backage or frontage roads to the north and the south. We have a board that goes over that. But basically, all traffic in this area would be directed over to 34th Avenue in that intersection or south to 6th Street. So with that, I do want to move to US14 bypass west of Brookings. And some of the needs here to address that, one of them is the structure age, that the bridge over US14 bypass of US14 westbound was constructed in 1970. So we'd anticipate that it's going to be a need for reconstruction or replacement sometime here within this study's planning horizon. Thus, we're looking at various concepts at what this area could look like when it comes time to replace that structure. Another need identified here is that it doesn't facilitate all movements, very directional to the west, and then funneling traffic into Brookings into 6th Street. Also, look to incorporate that future Brookings development to the north. That 469th Avenue is likely also to be a very key north-south corridor in this area. And how can we tie in 469th Avenue into US 14 heading into Brookings? That, from a traffic and operations standpoint, be very advantageous to the area. And then also with operations and safety, that there's been a number of needs identified and just some general issues with conflicts, slowing traffic, accelerating traffic, turning traffic on this area that we're looking to address. So from a concept summary standpoint, I have various concepts to look at access management, such as the figure that's shown here with the green series of access and frontage and backage roads. And then the blue looks at potential 469th Avenue realignment if the existing interchange were to stay in place. So this could be viewed as a shorter term concept. Then we also looked at some intersection concepts that eliminates the interchange and brings everything to an at-grade intersection. Then we also look at some interchange concepts as well as some 469th Avenue connectivity possibilities. So a couple intersection concepts here. The first one on the left ties in US 14 slash 6th Street into the 469th Avenue intersection. Essentially 469th, there, that intersection would facilitate all movements in all directions. The one there to the right is essentially building that at-grade intersection generally in the same location as the current interchange. In this instance, 469th Avenue for that connectivity would have to extend off to the north and to the west. And that's where you see the inset of potential alignments and connections over to 469th Avenue that would entail. We have a number of concepts looking at this that if you want interest in that, I'd refer you to the boards. And then we did look at a few different interchange concepts. This one essentially takes the existing configuration and kind of brings in more of that interchange feel instead of that westbound traffic coming to a stop sign to head west towards Volga, and now come in more like an interchange with a on-ramp merge location. With that, we'd also have some pretty significant access management through there through the use of a frontage road. There'd also need to be some sort of 469th Avenue connection elsewhere beyond this area. And then we looked at some of the more conventional types, really looking at to facilitate all movements at this location, as well as tying in 469th Avenue. The one on the left is your typical standard diamond type interchange, very similar to what you see throughout South Dakota. And then there's a desire to look at an interchange that where the high volume movements do not have to stop in that grade intersection. The eastbound traffic would have a free flow movement on US 14 heading east in Brookings. Heading west out of Brookings towards Volga, you would simply go around the loop ramp and be on your way to the west as well. And then moving east, US 14 bypass east intersection, east of Brookings, kind of needs to address through here, really, from a traffic standpoint, to the north, not a significant need. From a corridor standpoint, we don't really anticipate needing much more than what's out there right now, the single through lane in each direction. So that's what the concepts reflect. There was some concern, kind of more from a truck perspective, including the intersection angle, that eastbound and northbound left turn movement, as well as the southbound to eastbound acceleration. In particular, that there's a desire expressed where that southbound to left or eastbound movement left turn, that the trucks could turn into acceleration lane, get up to speed, and then merge into the through lane and continue on your way eastbound. And then also setting the intersection up for increasing traffic volumes that potentially as Aurora and other communities grow to the east, we'd likely see those volumes continue to increase along this corridor as well. So with that, the concepts encompass, kind of from that rural type intersection feel, I'll show you in the next slide, all the way to more of an urban type intersection feel. And the one that is shown here is kind of in between. Addresses, kind of that that southbound to eastbound acceleration this concern that was mentioned before, as well as the intersection angle, and kind of sets it up, for future signalization if that were ever warranted. And then more of the rural and urban footprints, what you see here with the rural, kind of more of the sweeping right turns between the two routes, and then the urban intersection, essentially kind of like that urban intersection feel, pulls everything in tight to a single point. All right, and now I'd like to move all the way west, US14 in Volga, a couple slides through here. And the needs to address here, really not as much from an operation standpoint. We already have the 5-lane section running through Volga. So in terms of US14 operations, we're really well set for quite a while. A lot of it gets into more of the future development, the changing traffic patterns, and that traffic growth on the side streets wishing to access US14. Another need is managing access. If you're probably well aware that there's a number of access points along US14 throughout Volga. Also, there's some concern with side street approach widths and off-tracking, particularly with trucks. Then also looking at various bicycle and pedestrian routes. So the concepts we developed, a few different intersection improvement concepts, as well as some alternative access and bicycle pedestrian facility route potential concepts. So first, starting at Samara Avenue, which is the very west intersection in Volga, and there's some operational and safety needs identified here, and a lot of it had to do with where that essentially that 2-lane to 5-lane transition occurs, and in particular heading eastbound. So if you're familiar with the intersection, heading eastbound into Volga, you enter the Samara Avenue intersection in 1 through lane. On the east side of the intersection, it opens up into 2 lanes. And from an operations and even to a safety aspect, that it really doesn't really do much, that you still have to sit there on that Samara Avenue approach because you don't know which lane that car is going into. Are they going to stay in the inside lane, or are they going to dart over to the outside lane within that intersection? So really looking at addressing some of that, as well as setting up Samara Avenue for future development. The one on the left, that concept essentially clarifies that lane add on the right or on the east side, and that northbound to right turn to eastbound right turn movement comes into its additional lane. So essentially that channelizing island brings you in. You won't need to stop for that right turn movement. You can come enter into US14 in your own lane. The concept there on the right essentially extends the 5-lane section further west and reduces some of that ambiguity and confusion potentially within that intersection just by extending the 5-lane section further west and allowing the 2-lane to 4-lane area to sort itself out outside of Volga. And then one other concept we developed here is the Samara Avenue rearage connection. And east of Samara Avenue, there's a number of access points there along the north side. And this rearage connection would provide for potential future opportunities for some of those parcels to tie in to the rearage connection instead of along US14. Moving east, Hansina Avenue. This was the intersection that's probably that next one for meeting signal warrants, that it sees considerably more volume than any of the intersections further to the west. It's also identified as an important pedestrian crossing location. So coupled with that potential future signalization when it were to meet warrants, also add an eastbound right turn lane from a safety aspect, but also to help maybe remove some of that traffic from the through lanes when there's a train crossing the tracks. That traffic, instead of queuing in a through lane, can now potentially queue in a right turn lane. Then moving east to Caspian Avenue, we did see an operational need here to add a northbound right turn lane, so that's reflected in this concept. And then to the north, just looking at what a potential build out of that leg would look like to address future development along the north side of US14. And then just want to touch on a little bit of the corridor west of Volga. We're currently in the analysis phase looking at this, essentially looking at the number of lanes that's needed moving forward, really between that US 1481 intersection and Volga, with most of that being a 2-lane section. And through the analysis, we're looking at 3 main concepts. And the first one is maintaining the two-lane highway that's out there right now, plus intersection improvements. Also looking at a two-lane highway with passing lanes, also known as a Super 2 type highway. That would be similar to the picture you see here, which is of the Heartland Expressway in northwest Nebraska. And basically what that does, it adds 1 or 2 passing lanes in each direction at locations along this corridor. And the goal is that people wait, if there's a slow vehicle, they'll wait until that passing lane opens up, and they'll use the passing lane to get around the vehicle instead of those risky maneuvers of trying to pass in oncoming traffic. And then the third concept we're looking at is multi-lane highway, 4-lane divided, similar to what you see on other South Dakota rural multi-lane highways. So the board we have for this is very data intensive, so if this is an area that interests you, just reach out to someone on the state advisory team and we can go over that board with you during the open house. And then just want to close here with a few other concepts. I'll refer you to the concept boards for this. Intersection turn lane improvements, we do have a few of those locations as well, 458th Avenue, 459th Avenue, 466th Avenue. We also have a representation of planned DOT project at the US14, US81 intersection that essentially brings the eastbound and westbound lanes in tight through the intersection area. We also have a number of boards on potential ITS concepts, including a figure that identifies potential locations for dynamic message signs, cameras, as well as advanced warning for the 2 railroad crossings. We also have a few different boards on potential pedestrian bicycle routes in Volga, as well as between Brookings and Volga. And we don't have a board developed for this, but we also did a blowing snow review throughout the corridor. And there was some benefit identified for potential implementation of a snow fence between 457th Avenue and 459th Avenue, along with a few other spot locations throughout the corridor. So with that, that concludes kind of an overview of the concepts we developed at this stage of the study. The next steps, will be compiling your feedback that we receive here over the next couple weeks. That'll move us into the next phase where we begin to refine those concepts, identify feasible scenarios, which essentially is trying to group concepts together, and then complete our detailed analysis. So our goal is that we'll be back for our third and final public meeting around that spring 2020 timeframe. At that point, we'll be presenting feasible scenarios for your review and feedback. We might have a few potential recommendations at that point, but really looking for your feedback for us to finalize the recommendations and finalize the reports for completion of the study around that June 2020 timeframe. So with that, I just want to thank everyone. I know that was a lot of information. Like I said, tried to condense it the best I could. If you have questions and comments, I encourage you to ask people from the site advisory team meeting here as part of the open house. Like I said, we'll be back in spring 2020 for the third and final public meeting. So really thanks everyone for your time. We appreciate it, and we'll see you in the spring.